Chapter 28. Lure your enemy onto the roof, then take away the ladder. Avoid terrain that features cliffs and crags, narrow passes, tangled bush, and quagmires. While avoiding such places ourselves, try to lure the enemy into such areas so that when we attack, the enemy will have this type of terrain at his rear. From Sun Tzu, The Art of War. With baits and deceptions, lure your enemy into treacherous terrain. Then cut off his lines of communication and avenue of escape. To save himself, he must fight both your own forces and the elements of nature. Warring States period, China. In 341 BC, Wei was attacking Han, which in turn appealed to Qi for assistance. The king of Qi sought the advice of Sun Bin, who recommended waiting until both armies were exhausted before intervening. To ensure Han would put up a good defense, Sun sent messages saying that an army was being readied and would be there at the first opportunity. After several weeks, reports came in that both armies were weary of the siege, and Sun again set out for the capital of Wei, an apparent repeat of his earlier strategy, besiege Wei to rescue Zhao. When the general of Wei, Pang Zhuan, heard that Sun had crossed into Wei, he was furious. He then sent his army to catch up with them before they reached the capital. This time, Peng was not going to allow himself to be ambushed, so he sent scouting parties well ahead of the main army. Having outfoxed Peng twice before, Sun's generals wondered how he could bait him into another trap. Sun said, "I know Peng Zhuan has a low opinion of the Qi soldiers and believes them to be cowards. We will allow him to believe this." Sun ordered that when his men encamp the first night, they build one fire for every man, and on the next night, one fire for every 2 men, and on the third night, one fire for every 3 men. When Peng was in a few days' march of the Qi forces, he questioned his scouts who had been spying on the Qi army since it entered into their territory. They reported that on the first night, 100,000 fires were lit. On the second night, only 50,000 fires were lit, and on the third night, only 30,000 fires had been lit. Peng concluded that the deeper the Qi army penetrated into Wei territory, the more their men became frightened and deserted. "They have heard I am here, and they are fleeing in fear of my presence," declared Peng. One of his advisers was not so convinced and warned, "But the men of Qi are notorious for their trickery. We should be careful before pursuing them recklessly." However, Peng did not heed his advice. Meanwhile, Sun found the perfect terrain to stage an ambush. A stretch of road that was flanked by hills and woods. In these woods he concealed his archers, and at the entrance of the valley he had them build a rough defensive barrier. About 700 yards further along the trail, there was a large oak tree. Sun peeled off the tree's bark and wrote in large characters, "Peng Zhuang will die here." He gave instructions that the archers should lie in wait throughout the night, and when they saw a light appear near the tree, shoot towards the light. As expected, Peng arrived at the entrance of the valley shortly after dark and first encountered the defensive obstruction. He laughed, telling his men this was but a desperate trick of a fleeing enemy. He ordered the barrier torn down and was proceeding along the road when a scout reported that something had been written on a tree up ahead. Peng went to investigate for himself. He ordered a torch brought up so that he could better read the characters. When the light of the torch shone on the tree, Sun's hidden archers rained 5,000 arrows towards it, killing everyone in the vanguard and wounding Peng Zhuan. Knowing he was beaten, Peng cut his own throat. His last words were, "That upstart. Now with my death, I've made his reputation." And it did. Sun Bin went on to write a famous book on strategy called The Art of Warfare. The book was lost for almost 2,000 years until recently discovered in a Han Dynasty tomb. Summary. Every type of terrain can provide both an advantage for one form of warfare while a hindrance for another. A large force has the advantage in open terrain while it is hindered by the narrow, but a small force is vulnerable in open spaces yet protected by the narrow. Therefore, the key is to lure your enemy into a terrain that hinders his abilities while helping your own.